All right, hello everybody. I am starting again because I just went on this huge long tangent all about when I went out to dinner with my family and started giving all the details about what the whole meal and the service that we had and everything that was all involved was like. And then I realized this is going to be boring as all get out to anybody else. So, I'm starting again. Here we go. All right. So as you know, I was doing HCG. I'd lost, I think, about 17 pounds on it. Then we had a graduation weekend, and I gained like about five of those back over the course of the weekend. And then it's been a week. So another weekend went by, and this past weekend we celebrated both high school and college graduation together by going out to dinner as a family. It was extravagant. It was a big plethora of food festivities. They kept giving us additional food. There was warm bread and warm butter that was there. There were appetizers. There was free cheesecakes they were just giving because my one daughter, I mean, they didn't even know we were celebrating graduations, but my other daughter had graduated recently and was excited to order a drink because she's 21. Um, and so they kept saying, let's celebrate your birthday. And they were giving all kinds of free food. I mean, it was crazy. Um, so much so that I thought I'm going to order something I would never make for myself and something I haven't had in a long time. It's been definitely over a decade, maybe two, since I've had a French dip sandwich. And this restaurant, O'Charlie's, made it amazing. So I ate a quarter of it. That's all I could eat. And I can put food down, trust me. But it's just between the appetizers and all the bread and rolls that we had, I was stuffed. And then we came back to the house and we had homemade almond cake with buttercream almond frosting. Okay, back on track today. So I'm starting HCG again. A little hesitant about it because my older daughter's boyfriend is coming into town on Thursday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're going to have 3 days of him here. So I know that that's going to be additional food, including one of those days going to an amusement park all day. But I just feel like I don't want to wait another week. So here we go. We're going to start with numbers again. All right. Here's the great news. Let me tell you the great news. I'm going to tell you the great news. I did gain those 5 pounds over the course of that weekend. And of course, that was part of that was a rebound of my body, like getting more carbs. Then obviously your body retains water when it has carbs. It wasn't used to the amount of carbs that it had 2 weekends ago, I'm talking about, when I was at my daughter's college for graduation. But over this past week, even though I didn't eat great, I gained nothing. And that shocks me. I mean, I can't even put into words because that is not what happens in my world. I was expecting to have gained about another 4 to 5 pounds and then being like, oh, I can't believe my net loss is only 7 pounds after all of this. But no, no. So I'm happy about that. I'm happy about that. All right, so we're back on track and starting up again, and I'm going to talk about HCG. Oh, let me also just share with you, and this has been going on the past week, we adopted a cat. We went to the shelter, decided to get a friend for my cat who just is still a year old and just as active and wanting to play all the time. And I thought, what's going to happen at the end of the summer when all three kids are gone? My oldest leaves at the end of this week. She's been here, that'll be 3 weeks that she's been visiting from California. Oh boy, do I love COVID and the opportunities that the fact that she was here for 6 weeks over Christmas and now 3 weeks now has just been awesome because she's working all virtually online. She can do that. Um, this will probably be the last time that that's ever going to happen, that she's going to be here for such long periods of time. But we'll see how things go. Okay. Um, so I decided I think we need to get a buddy for Cosette, my cat. And we went to the shelter, and after 2.5 hours of taking every single cat out of its cage and watching it interact with the other cats and interact with us, we wanted a cat that both would not hiss at any of the cats in the cages and would come to us and want to be interacting with us. And I want that for myself because my cat currently always wants to be near me, but she doesn't necessarily want to be touched. Um, she wants to be played with, but not necessarily touched. So I thought it would be nice to have a pet that I could actually pet. A pet that I could pet. What a novel idea. I mean, a dog would be ideal, but life is too crazy to do a dog. So we got another cat, and ironically, I happened to give out these stickers to my student today. This looks exactly like cat number two. So cat number one you've seen in previous videos. It's gray as well, but it's more of a tabby cat, so it has more of a gray and white stripe in the fur. All gray on her back, because her mom was all gray like this. Um, but her belly and face has some white in it, and it has some gray and white stripes. My new cat, who we call Chubbs, after Nick Chubb, the kindest, nicest, hardest working, put your nose to the grind, greatest football player ever who plays for the Cleveland Browns. Um, so we named him Chubbs after Nick Chubb. All right, so okay, again, I digress, but this wasn't as bad of a digression as the previous video was. I'm going to talk to you about something very exciting today, and this is a part of the protocol I had never seen before. And it basically goes back and talks about how he came upon his experiment and why he started doing HCG and what the results were and everything. So I love it. Today's is quite lengthy. The part I'm going to read tomorrow's not as lengthy, but tomorrow also talks about like some results. So kind of today is all setting up where it all came from, and I just find it fascinating. I hope you find it interesting too, because I just thought this was like, whoa, how come I've never read this before? I've heard about it, I knew about it, but I've never read all this. Okay, so I will struggle through some of the longer words. I apologize in advance, but here we go. It's under the title of The Treatment of Obesity. Okay. If obesity is always due to one specific diacephalic deficiency, it follows that the only way to cure it is to cure this deficiency. At times, at first this seemed an utterly hopeless undertaking. The greatest obstacle was that one could hardly hope to connect an inherited trait localized deep inside the brain. And while we did possess a number of drugs whose point of action was believed to be in the diacephalin, none of them had the slightest effect on the fat center. There was even a pointer showing a direction in which pharmacological research could move to find a drug that had such a specific action. The closest approach were the appetite-reducing drugs, the amphetamines, but these cured nothing. So he goes on to talk about a curious observation. Mulling over this depressing situation, I remember a rather curious observation made many years ago in India. At that time, we knew very little about the function of the diacephalin, and my interest centered around the pituitary gland. Frolick, this is a scientist's name, Frolick had described cases of extreme obesity and sexual underdevelopment in youth suffering from a new growth of an anterior pituitary lobe, producing what then became known as Froelich's disease. However, I don't know if it's Frolic or Frolic. Frolic sounds like isn't a Sound of Music? Isn't there a frolic? Anyway. However, it was very soon discovered that the identical syndrome, though running a less fulminating course, was quite common in patients whose pituitary gland was perfectly normal. These are the so-called fat boys, not politically correct, with long, slender hands, breasts that any flat-chested maiden would be proud to possess, large hips, large buttocks, large thighs with striation, knocked knees, and underdeveloped genitals, often with undescended testicles. It also became known that in these cases the sex organs could be developed by giving the patients doses of a substance extracted from the urine in pregnant women. It having been shown that when this substance was injected into sexually immature rats, it made them precociously mature. The amount of substance which produced this effect in one rat was called an international unit, and the purified extract was accordingly called human, here we go, chorionic gonadotrophin, when chorionic, whereby chorionic signifies that it is produced by the placenta, and gonadotrophin that its action is sex gland directed. So these are where the words human, obviously we know what human means. Chorionic means from the placenta. Gonadotrophin means that it's related to the sex glands. All right. The usual way of treating fat boys with underdeveloped genitals is to inject several hundred international units twice a week. International units referred to as IUs. So all of you who are doing HCG and you're doing the injectables, you measure the syringe by IUs. So you're familiar with how many IUs do you inject. But those of us who are doing drops or patches or that aren't as familiar with that term. But it stands for international units. Okay, I'll continue. Human chorionic gonadotrophin, which we shall henceforth simply call HCG, thank you, is expensive. And as fat boys are fairly common among Indians, I tried to establish the smallest effective dose. In the course of the study, three interesting things emerged. The first was that when fresh pregnancy urine from the female ward was given in quantities of about 300 cc's by retention enema, not a fun way to receive it. So when they first did this experiment, they did it by enema. As good results could be attained as by injecting the pure substance. Okay, so they found injecting it as an enema received the same results as doing pure injection. So why they chose the enema, I don't know. The second was that small daily doses appeared to be just as effective as much as large ones given twice a week. Thirdly, and that is the observation that concerns us here, when such patients were given small daily doses, they seemed to lose their ravenous appetite, though they never gained nor lost weight. Strangely enough, however, their shape did change. Though they were not restricted in diet, there was a distinct decrease in the circumference of their hips. All right, I'm going to stop there because this is quite lengthy, and then the next section kind of summarizes how this worked into realizing that HCG could be a method for diet. But that's the whole history behind it, was him going back and looking at these quote unquote fat boys and their fat deposits and where they were and trying to treat them for other things and realizing that in their treatment of using this urine from pregnant women, like who was the first one to think of doing that? Taking pregnant women's urine and injecting it as an enema into somebody as a form of treatment. I just amazed. But it was to treat this specific syndrome, and it's I think referred to as Froelic's disease now, that was identified and common in Indian males. And in the treatment to try to fix the issues with the sex glands, which is maybe where they found the connection of the hormones with women, and to take care of that stuff as well as their interesting body structures that were all very similar with fat deposits in the same areas from one to another, which was, I can't remember what it all said. I remember it was thighs and hips and one other part of their body. I can't remember if I would see it here. They had long, thin fingers. Oh, breasts. So male breasts. And then large hips, buttocks, and thighs. All right, and then knock knees. So that's when you kind of walk where your knees are touching and then your feet are out, which is common and specifically in obese children. All right, so yeah, so in all of this, one of the side things that they found as a part of treating them is that they didn't really have much of an appetite. Now, I find it fascinating, though, that in this treatment, they didn't have much of an appetite, but they really weren't losing much weight. However, their size, their hips and butt area started getting smaller. So obviously they thought, we're kind of onto something. And then they're going to play with it a little bit. And then we're going to talk about how that kind of evolved into using this same HCG, but not doing it as a urine enema, but extracting just the HCG hormone from it, and giving it to people as a form of weight management. And it's actually not very long, what we're going to read about tomorrow, compared to what we read today. But don't you find that just sort of fascinating? Now, I will tell you, I have heard from many, many sources that HCG originated because of, in India, studying pregnant women who didn't eat much of anything. Was it India or was it Africa? So now part of me wants to say it wasn't India, it was Ethiopia, I thought. And maybe this is what I had heard. I'm pretty sure it was Ethiopia. That they were trying to figure out why women developed or gave birth to normal birth weight babies, even though they themselves were significantly malnourished, and that there weren't problems with their children when they gave birth to them. Now, I don't recommend this to anybody. I think our studies have indicated that there are adverse effects that can affect children, but by and large, based on the level of malnutrition and lack of nutrition that these pregnant women were receiving, how is it that they didn't have significantly disabled or deformed or problems with their children, that they were normal children? Probably, I would say they were low birth weight children, but nevertheless, that's what I was always told and read and heard about when I read any kind of blog and all that, is that that's what precipitated the whole study, was that they realized that, well, the reason was because these women had HCG and therefore they were taking more of their body fat, any body fat they had, even though they didn't have food that go into their mouth, and that was going to the baby, which is true and that makes sense down the road. But I mean, unless I find it deeper into this protocol, because then he starts changing subjects again after this next paragraph that I'm going to read tomorrow. So I don't know. I don't know where that story came from, but if I find it, I will definitely read it to you. It all makes sense, and maybe that's another study, like after the original protocol that he did. But at the same time, you would have thought that that was a study that he did prior to doing this protocol, because this protocol was set forth as something like, here's the diet that we're doing. This is not a protocol that's an actual scientific research. It's a protocol put together after scientific research was done, which is why it's more conversational, and it's designed to be a protocol to tell you how to do the HCG diet. All right, so maybe there was another study out there. I will try to do some digging and find it for you if I can find it. But what I found fascinating and I did not know was this, that these boys in India is actually what precipitated the whole thing, and trying to work with them. And actually, the studies were done with them trying to work on this Froelic's disease that they all had. or these common body types they had. And then when Frolic, it became known as Frolic's disease because he was the scientist that was studying them and trying to find a way to, remedy and solve their situation. Um, that it was Dr. Simeons reflecting back on having read that research in the past and then kind of inquiring more about it and thinking, what if we can play and tweak this and work with this because we are not able to tap into this diencephalic center in our brain. Nobody's been successful in figuring out a way to bring it back, this genetic sense in our brain that causes many people to gain a lot of weight. So, HCG was then kind of born. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. All right, this was quite lengthy. I apologize. I actually had two back to back slots not booked today, so I knew I could sit here and chat longer. And I'm sorry that I did it at the mercy of you. I will be here tomorrow and I will talk to you about the next section of this and how it evolved into HCG. All right, you take care. It was good talking to you. It's good to be back on track. And I will see you mañana. Bye.